Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pilots on the Fly. I'm Pilot Bob Dallas, and it's my profound pleasure to welcome each and every one of the audience members who are tuning in from all over the world. Thank you so much for being there. This is an exciting moment for aviation, folks. This is where you bring the enthusiasts together, and you team up an enthusiast with a real pilot, and you're going to get something really, really amazing, like you're going to be seeing tonight. A reminder to each and every one of you who are joining us tonight, feel free to participate in our event. You can give us your comments, your likes, and if you have any questions, don't be shy. So I'm broadcasting from Montreal, Canada, and my co-host who's making his debut as a broadcaster tonight is out in Nashville, Tennessee. He's an actual airline pilot. He's a cargo pilot. And I'm so excited, and I can't wait to introduce him to you. So standing by is my co-host, Captain Cartwright.
Hi, Bob.
Captain, wow, it's such a thrill to have you on here.
Great to be here.
So, Captain, tell us, you're on your layoff right now?
I am on the in-between schedules. I actually go back on duty Wednesday.
Great stuff. So, people know me a little bit because I'm on Facebook every day with the blogs, Ask Pilot Bob, and I've got a whole bunch of things going on. But let's get to know who Captain Cartwright is.
Sure, be glad to introduce myself. 767 captain for a cargo airline. Started flying when I was in college. My dad took me flying, and when I was 10 years old, he was a pilot from just a private pilot, and took me flying when I was 10, which got me curious about aviation. And then when I decided to try to go to college to figure out what do I want to do, I went to school for aeronautical engineering. And while I was going to school, I was working at one of the local airports here in Nashville and working the ramp and trying to help with maintenance and things. And became curious about flying again. I wanted to get my pilot's license. So as soon as I started flying with people, I was all in. I was hooked.
Well, you're living out your dream, whereas, I could only dream about being a pilot. And I'm sure it must be the best job in the world, because I know that I sat in an actual cockpit of a 737-200, and man, is it tight in there.
It is tight. I just happened to jump seat home last night on a 737-800 MAX.
Wow. So, James, without further ado, we have a few topics to talk about this evening. So a reminder to the audience, if you have any questions, you want to make any comments, please feel free. James and I would love to engage with you. Our first topic, we're going to be talking about an event that happened a long time ago, not in a galaxy far away, actually, here in Canada, not too far away from where I'm living, the Gimli glider. James, talk to us about the Gimli glider and what you know about it.
Well, I happen to fly a plane just like the Gimli glider. It's a 767-200 series, and they were fairly new back then. They're actually 70s technology. So this incident that happened, that they happened to run out of fuel and became a glider, happened on July 23rd of 1983. And Air Canada Flight 143 will happen to be the lucky guys on board. They were going to Montreal to Edmonton, and it was an introduction of a different way to look at, because we're from different countries, and a lot of different countries have different way of measuring things. And so the metric system, which is not what we use here in the United States, we use the imperial system. The metric system was being introduced on fuel loadings and how the aircraft measured fuel. So it was in kilograms versus pounds. Now, most of the time when in the United States, in the imperial system, we use pounds on fuel burn. So they were measuring fuel by kilograms, or used to using pounds for measuring fuel. And they were trying to come up with a way to measure the fuel with kilograms and do the conversions. And if you know the difference in the two, it's almost 2 to 1. I mean, it's actually a little over 2 to 1. So 20 kilograms of fuel could be over 40 kilograms or 40 pounds of actual weight of an Imperial system. So it's quite a bit of difference in how that works.
So the blunder went through many hands. It went through the ground crew and also the captains themselves. And there is some cues that they missed. They were confident they were actually doing the right thing. So how could so many people miss this?
Well, just like anything that happens in aviation, there's what we call the Swiss cheese model. And you know how Swiss cheese has a lot of holes through it, but they don't necessarily all line up. So you can't stick something from one end to the other of the Swiss cheese. So you have these little guards at every little step in aviation. So just like you have the ground crews, you have the fuelers, you have the fuel trucks, and then you have the people that are doing the actual loading and taking care of the what we call them a load master in the cargo side, but they're actually taking care of the paperwork for all the loadings and doing the weight and balance that has to be done on the aircraft. Well, there was a couple things that lined up together that caused this incident. So one of them was the truck that they were fueling with was still in pounds. Two, they were trying to figure out how they needed to look and see how much fuel was in the aircraft already, and then how much fuel it was because it was in kilograms. And one of the problems with this aircraft was what was called an MEL item, missing equipment list or minimum equipment list. So I call it missing because that item is not available to me to use. Well, their fuel panel in the overhead of the aircraft, just like this behind you there, was MEL'd out. So they had no measurements on their fuel panel up there. So they had a computer that was telling them, and which was still new to a lot of pilots back then, of how much fuel they had and how much it would burn and how much they had left. And that would have worked all fine and well if they would have been on the right measurement standard. So you load the airplane up with 20, which you think is 20 kilograms or 20,000 kilograms, excuse me, 20,000 kilograms of fuel in a 7.6, and you need 40,000 kilograms or 40,000 pounds loaded, or that which is equivalent to 40,000 pounds. But you need 20 or 40 kilograms instead of 40,000 pounds. So you can see how easy it is to mix it up. I'm sitting here getting mixed up talking about it. But as you can tell, it's part of that Swiss cheese model. There's a lot of people messed up.
Which goes to say that in aviation, a majority of the times, accidents are human error.
Very much so. Human factors is the majority of the reasons why there's accidents in aviation.
And what is particularly scary about this, it's that at 41,000 feet, the plane's engines just stop. And you were saying off air that luckily the FO, the first officer, knew something about the area. They were flying over Winnipeg. They left Montreal to go towards Edmonton. And while they were flying up and above Winnipeg, there was an abandoned airfield. It was a military field. And luckily, the FO knew about this because it wasn't even charted on the papers they had up in the plane.
That is correct. And one of the things that people don't think about, if you run out of fuel and you run out of thrust on an aircraft, you still have gliding capability. That plane's just not going to fall out of the sky. So you basically set what's called a glide speed up. And then once you set that glide speed up, you've got a certain amount of distance that you can cover. And from 40,000 feet, you can actually cover 30, 40,000 miles or 30 or 40 miles. So likelihood of an airport not being around in 30 or 40 miles from that distance, or even longer, it could be even 50, 60 miles. Typically, we measure things out depending on the field altitude at a 3-to-1 level on a glide. But that's when you got power. When you don't have power, it's a little bit different. But as they were trying to go to the destination airport and then tried to get to one that was shorter than the destination airport, when they ran out of fuel, they saw that they couldn't make it. They were doing the calculations, the 3-to-1 that I'm talking about, and they knew that they couldn't make it. So they were trying to come up with all available options on what they could do.
Wow, that's and the fast thinking of the first officer is just like mind-boggling.
He really saved the day. He saved all those people, and even the aircraft. They continued to use the aircraft many years after that.
And what is amazing is that there were actually people on that runway because they had turned that into a drag strip.
That is correct. And they luckily somebody saw it and saw it coming, and they moved out of the way so they could make a successful landing without hurting anybody.
Because that thing, it was as silent as a bird. If it wouldn't have been for someone looking, there's no way in the world they would have known that that plane was coming right at them.
That is correct. It was awful quiet, unfortunately so.
You know, it's going to sound pretty ridiculous, but I know that you can't put a horn on a plane, but isn't there some kind of way that you put some kind of an audible device on an airplane? I know it's not very useful at 40,000 feet, but even though when you're on the ground or like an incident like that, that audible device would have came in so handy.
You mean something like a foghorn or a hailing horn, like on a boat or something?
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting thought. I haven't thought of that before, but as in the cockpit, when things happen, I've had a couple instances myself that I've had to really keep myself collected to be able to come out with a great income. You're busy.
Yes.
You're busy trying to figure out how far have I got, where am I at? And these guys didn't even know where they were going. They were trying to find the airport. They were even using air traffic control, again, use all available resources to try to figure out where this old airport was. And luckily, the FO had done some previous flight instruction from a lot of the airports in the area. So he knew the area pretty well, but he still didn't know exactly where the airport was. They were looking for it. And, of course, when the airport is no longer active, it doesn't necessarily look like an airport anymore.
There's that, too.
Yeah.
Of course, they don't have the ILS approach, any lights or anything like that at all.
No radio beacons to try to find it. Even no light beacons or anything if you was at night, but definitely. So it was a very fortunate event, and if it wasn't for his knowledge of the area, it could have turned out a lot worse.
And let's also say that the fact that it was during the daytime, that helped a lot, because I don't think they would have done that during the night.
No, because they would have never saw it. That is true.
Okay, so let's move on to the next topic. You are a man who wears many hats. You're not only an airline pilot, you're an avid boater, and you're also a helicopter pilot. So Haas, talk to us about flying a helicopter. And of course, we all know that it's not the same thing as an airplane. The properties, the physics of the whole operation of flying a helicopter is just not the same. How much different is it?
It is a completely different animal. Now, once you're in forward flight in a helicopter, it doesn't act a whole lot different from an airplane in forward flight. But getting from stop to go, from a hover to forward flight, and from forward flight back to a stop is a lot different than what you're used to. Now, when you're doing an approach with an airplane, you're usually doing an approach at a speed. And that speed is consistent all the way down that approach path. And when you're doing an approach in a helicopter, that speed actually keeps coming back up until the point you're at the spot that you want to land at. And the landing spot is just a spot. It's not a runway. So when you land in that spot, you've got to be at the perfect timing. You got to be right at 0 miles per hour or knots, depending on how it's being measured in the aircraft, like we talked earlier. You've got to be right at 0 to be right at a hover just a few feet above the ground to hit that spot. So the whole time you're approaching in a helicopter, you're not doing a consistent speed. You're actually coming back. But meanwhile, you're losing altitude. You're also losing altitude at a lot slower rate than typical approaches in airplanes as well. So that's just one of the many differences. The utility to be able to use a helicopter in and out of really tight spots makes them very unique. you know, just to be able to something else that's very critical. You talked about using a different system to be able to like hail somebody on the ground. You know, you don't think about it a lot, but weight is critical in these aircraft. Helicopters, weight is extremely critical. So the when you're looking at an engine out or something like that on an approach, and when you have your most critical time in a helicopter is usually at what they call dead man's curve. And that dead man's curve is your most critical time where an auto rotation may not get you down safely. Ooh. And may not get the helicopter down safely either.
I just want to give a shout out to my good friend who's tuned in, Esther Brzezinski. Thanks so much for tuning in. Esther's a great friend of mine. She was my co-host on our noon hour show. Great to see you, Esther. Esther, you know what? We got a great guy, very knowledgeable, a great pilot. Why don't you come up with a question for Captain Cartwright? He's going to be more than happy to answer you. And Esther knows a thing or two about airports and planes. She's got about, I'm telling you, 50 of them coming in every hour. She lives right next to YUL. Okay. The Montreal International Airport, the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Airport. So Esther, go ahead and ask the question to Captain Cartwright. He'll be more than happy to oblige. So let's move on to the next topic here, and we're talking about our favorite planes, mine's and yours.
Sure, yeah.
So, Captain, tell us about which plane that you appreciate very much.
It's going to be hard to say that I have one that's over the 7.6 that I'm flying now. Now, the 7.6 is a very utility and very good airplane for different types of missions. Both cargo and people, they're used still today, and they're even made still today for the military. And they're made for the utility purpose of fueling other planes. They're actually replacing the KC-135 aircraft that they're trying to retire with the 7.6, which there's another designation for it. But anyway, the 7.6 is a great aircraft. They've got both a 200 and a 300 version. Then there's also a 400 version out. The 400 version is more like the 787 than it is the 300 versions that I fly now. They've got a lot better electronics in them. In fact, I'm not sure that there's even a cargo version of that airplane. But nonetheless, the 7.6 is a great aircraft. Now, I'm typed because when you get typed in an aircraft, sometimes you get what's considered a bonus type. So the 7.5 is a bonus type on my certificate. So on my pilot certificate, if you look at it, the 7.5 is also on there, even though I've never flown one. But it is very similar to flying the cockpit, the layout, the visual references and stuff like that. The FAA says they're similar enough that if you can fly a 7.6, you can be typed in a 7.5, and then all it takes is get current in a 7.5 and either in a sim or in a cockpit as well. So a 7.5 has been likened as a very sporty airplane.
Well, okay. Well, I also have a preference for airplanes as well. Before we get to Esther's question, I just want to show you, Haas, what my favorite airplane is. I love the Dreamliner, especially this one here. Isn't that a beauty?
That's great.
Esther, what was the question Esther has? Okay, does turbulence bother pilots as much as it does passengers? Great question, Esther.
That depends on who you fly for. If you're Delta, yes. No, I'm just kidding. That's a joke. Now, for instance, for us cargo pilots, we don't have anybody complaining in the back. We don't do a food service. We don't do a beverage service. So for us, it's not nowhere near as big of a problem. Yes, it's a little uncomfortable at times when it gets to be pretty rough, but typically we can try to get out of it, or it's temporary. It's not for very long. For the reasons for your passengers in the back, especially even though you've got the seatbelt sign on, they tend to get up anyway, and they have to go to the bathroom and stuff like that. Some of these human needs that has to happen, and you can't really deny them of that. But to try to prevent injury and problems or spilt coffees on the guest, it's pretty important on the passenger airline.
And where would you, if you had a chance? Well, actually, okay, you're traveling as a passenger. You're going on a trip, and you're going to choose your seat on the plane. What is the worst place you can sit on a plane? I've been told it's in the tail section at the end. Is that right?
If you look over the accident data, I would say that's probably not correct. There's been a lot of people that has survived some pretty breakup accidents from the tail section. Now, again, it depends on what happens to the airplane. If it breaks up in flight, it's a very bad chance for everybody. But if it breaks up on the ground because of a hard landing and shifting of or something collapses, like a gear or something collapses on it, then around the wing area is a very strong area because you got such structure that's coming across right at the wing. You're also able to be the first one to be out because usually the emergency exits are right over the wing. But anyway, it just depends on, what happens. I don't know that there's really a statistic better or worse place to be.
Well, in terms of the ride, in terms of turbulence, is the turbulence worse all the way in the back?
I would not really. It's about the same on the whole aircraft. The aircraft is balancing on its wings, and the wings is where the turbulence is coming from. So it's going to bounce the whole aircraft.
And talking about favorite planes, this is the one that did it for me, the DC-10. This is it's hard to say if it's a Series 10 or a Series 30, but this is the plane that got me interested in aviation. What are your thoughts on the DC-10?
They're still using them for cargo. They're 3 engines. The use for them today for the 3 engines that they were originally developed for, which was a lot of overseas trips, flying over water for extended periods of time, is no longer needed for today. In fact, most of the ETOPS flying we do today is done with 2-engine aircraft that are flying over water.
Go ahead. Sorry, finish off.
No, it's one of the reasons why the 747 got retired. You got 2 engines versus 3 or 4. That's a lot more maintenance and a lot more fuel burn and stuff like that as well.
And the 747, the queen of the skies, they produced the last one. I believe they built 1,571 of them, and the last one went to Atlas Air. And that happened
is correct.
Recently. So Esther had another question. Pat, if you could put that up, please. Okay, it says, how often are you flying with autopilot?
Well, the majority of the flight is done with autopilot. Now, it depends on the individual pilot. Now, a lot of pilots like myself, I like to hand fly a lot. So I'll fly at least to 10,000 feet, sometimes to even 18,000 feet before I put the autopilot on. And then up at cruise, when you're up in the flight levels, you're just sitting back and monitoring things and doing paperwork and doing the stuff that you got to catch up with and checking fuel burns and, checking calculations, stuff like that. Now, when I come back in and I'm flying down below 10,000 feet, I usually keep the autopilot on until I'm right at the approach level. Sometimes it's the capture of the approach, or if it's a visual approach, I'll fly a visual approach. And I love doing it to keep my skills up. Even flying a hand-flown instrument approach, I do a lot just to keep my skills up. Because if you use the autopilot all the time, your skills degrade very quickly.
Indeed. Yes, I fully agree with you on that one. So let's move on to the next topic, and that would be passenger service versus flying cargo. So something, actually know both of those worlds because you started off as a passenger pilot and now you're a cargo pilot. Why did you make such a switch from passenger to cargo?
Well, it was opportunity is the reason why I made the switch. It happened to be the right opportunity at the right time. When I was flying passengers, I was constantly having to sit in airports. I was constantly having to go through busy airports, go through security through those busy airports, and then have to try to fight going to get somewhere to eat that's busy, that's a 30-minute line, or I'm having to just constantly deal with mass amounts of people. And even, through COVID, you saw a lot of incidents through COVID where passengers are acting up a lot. Medical emergencies is another issue that you deal with on the passenger side. I had one, I was in OE, which is online experience, just right after I got my type, and I was in the airplane, not even 2 or 3 flights, and we had a medical emergency.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so I mean, it's like, wow, it really does happen that. And then while you're up there flying, no matter what you're flying, we listen to a radio, called what's called Guard, which is an emergency channel. And you hear a lot of people coming across, other airlines coming across, trying to get help for passengers that are having emergencies.
Oh, wow.
So for me, it's just, it was a preference. I don't have to deal with the busyness. I'm not having to deal with doing 4, 5, 6 flights a day with passengers. I'm actually doing maybe 1 or 2 flights versus all the flights with all the passengers all the time. I've got the opportunity to fly a bigger aircraft quicker. I also got the opportunity to fly overseas quicker because typically if you're on the passenger side, flying overseas goes very senior. On the cargo side, no, it doesn't. You've got to be able to fly overseas if you're coming over to the cargo world. And they teach you those things, and they teach you the whole difference, what we call ETOPS flying. And it's flying airplanes are like an onion. Just like you're learning anything in a lot of different things, whether it's the medical industry, the computer industry, or whatever, every time you learn something, you peel back another layer of onion and you learn more and more. And that's basically, I had the opportunity to excel through those onion layers a lot quicker.
And of course, Patty just put up a banner not long ago, FAA rules for a passenger pilot versus a cargo pilot are a lot different. You don't have to go through the customs, through the security checks. You just like basically walk right off, and you get into some kind of, you hail a cab and off you go. Is that?
Yeah, it's pretty quick. I can be off the airplane and in a cab heading to the airport within 15 minutes. And I enjoy that. That is one of the things, and I don't have to walk through a busy terminal and go try to find a cab somewhere. That is one of the very good benefits of it. And then same thing when I arrive at an airplane. Typically, I can be right on the cockpit in 15 minutes and see maybe 5 or 10 people, and most of those people are loading boxes.
Wow. And I have a question for you, Captain Cartwright. How long does it take for you to prepare your flight plan? Because every flight, before any plane takes to the skies, you have a flight plan, and that would include all alternate airports. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on over there. So how long does that take before you, from the moment you walk into the cockpit, you do your flight plan until you're airborne?
Very good question, Bob. Funny thing of it is, there's a Part 121 that all the airlines fly under. Now, that's FAA regulations. So anything that's considered an airline pilot, it flies under the Part 121 rules. And the 121 rules, basically, you have a dispatcher that does all the flight planning, the dispatcher and / flight planning officers. And they do crew management. They also do all the flight planning. Now, as a captain, when I get on board, I have typically an hour or an hour and a half to get the airplane ready to go. And typically, even before that, I'll spend, if I'm in a hotel room, I'll spend another hour before that. I'll look over the flight plan if it's out and check everything out, make sure everything looks good. Or I'll, if it's a route that I know a lot and I've been there just yesterday, for instance, I may not spend the time doing that because I've already looked at the paperwork yesterday, and it's most likely going to be very similar to the yesterday's flight. But then I look at the paperwork when I get on board, and then we still have, for international flights, an hour and a half to get the airplane off the blocks. And then for standard flights within the country, an hour. So that's kind of a two-part question for us. An hour, hour and a half, and then again, that paperwork's usually out there about 2 hours before the flight's ready to go.
Wow. Okay, so there is a lot of work involved in being a pilot.
Yes.
It's not just taking up a plane and hey, having fun. There's a lot of work, a lot of preparation, and there's a lot of work. Even when you're flying, you got to be preparing, looking into the airport you're coming in. You have to start. Your approach, like what is it, 25 nautical miles from the airport? You start looking into preparing the approach?
It's actually way further out than that. We start preparing the approach within about probably about 40 to 45 minutes before the approach.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
That can be at 500 miles an hour, pretty far out.
We got another question from Esther, and she says in the question, what would you say is the biggest challenge being a cargo pilot?
That's a good question as well. One of the biggest questions is getting used to flying both sides of the clock. Speaking of the 121 rules that we were talking about earlier, the 121 cargo pilots do not have the same rest requirements that standard passenger pilots do. They fall under Part 117 FAA regulations for their rest requirements and how they can push them and schedule them and things like that. In the Part 121 world, for cargo pilots, they don't have to follow the 117 rules like the passenger side does. So that's that, and trying to manage your sleep. So, like, for instance, I'm a very I love being up late at night and stuff like that. I get up in the mornings just when my body says to get up, and it's typically around 7 o'clock, 7:30 or something like that. So that's my natural circadian rhythm that my body has. But as long as I typically get 6 to 8 hours in, I'm pretty good. Now, not everybody's the same way as me. So, but one of the things I do have problems with is if I've been up for 2 weeks off during the day and then I'm going to do a bunch of night flights and then I have to flip the clock, that's very difficult. And it tends to, it can get to where if I can't sleep well enough, then it can cause fatigue problems. And fatigue, as you know, can cause a lot of problems when it comes to safety.
It's very easy to get disorientated when you're very tired.
All of our senses suffer when you're very tired, including your balance and orientation and stuff. Yes. Your thinking is greatly reduced as well. So it could be a lot of things.
A reminder to the audience who are tuned in, thank you very much to each and every one of you for taking part in this presentation. Prepare your questions. Captain Cartwright, as you can see, he is a wealth of knowledge. He's got any question you can ask him, he's got the answer for you. We appreciate your comments. So let's move on to the next topic, and that would be drones. Let's talk about drones, Captain Cartwright. Over the years, drones, they turn out to be very, very helpful. They're good for, especially people who are roofers, that who are like buildings and all that, to do estimates for repair, damage, whatever. And we're seeing the use of drones right now in the war in the Ukraine. Mm-hmm. So there's many uses for drones. What are your thoughts on drones?
Well, it depends on the size of the drone and what its capability is. We have military drones that are very capable of defending with a pilot on the ground. And we don't expend a pilot's life in case something happens to that aircraft. If you're in that aircraft, you have a chance to eject, but that's if you survive whatever hit the aircraft or whatever happened to the aircraft. Now, on the smaller level of drones, typically like the agriculture drones that are growing right now, there's a lot of agriculture drones that are growing that are taking the place of different things of what aircraft has been done in smaller scale. So like spraying fields for pesticides and stuff for small farmers and stuff. Now it's a very good application for that because getting a small field sprayed with a aircraft that's used to spraying, hundreds and thousands of acres at a time, to get a small field sprayed that he needs to get sprayed is definitely not worth it to that ag pilot that's, spending a whole lot of money. And of course, those aircraft are really tight to get into small places like that. So which creates a safety hazard.
And I give a shout out to one of my good friends who's actually a certified drone instructor. He's a certified pilot. He teaches how to fly drones both in Canada and the U.S. None other than my good friend Michael Roberts. I don't know if you tuned in or not, but Mike, if you didn't tune in, you're missing a great show. But the fun thing about it is this is good for you and everybody else. If you missed the show while it was live, you can watch it right after the broadcast, and it's going to be on forever. You can watch it in a week. You can watch it in 2 weeks. The next topic we want to touch over here, it's wheel well stowaways. Now, this is very, very interesting. Are you familiar with some stowaway stories?
There's been a couple survival. Well, actually, I'm familiar with a few of both. But there's been a couple survival stowaways that has been very, very intriguing on how they survive that harsh environment that we fly in up there. So, for instance, this one particular person survived being stowed away at 30-something thousand feet for hours at a time. And as you know, oxygen gets thinner and thinner. The air gets thinner and thinner the higher you go. And regulations for us, if we have a cockpit altitude of 10,000 or above, we have to be on supplemental oxygen as a pilot in the cockpit. Now, that's for us regulated in 121. Now, if you're just a standard GA pilot that's flying your regular Cessna that's going somewhere, you can fly up to 12,500 feet for a period of time and without having the oxygen. And anything above that, passengers don't even have to have oxygen, just the pilots up to 15,000. So it's kind of interesting that they grade that stuff out like that, because again, like fatigue, lack of oxygen, your senses and awareness kind of degrades. So also, as you're rising in altitude, your temperature drops at a standard elapsed rate of about 2 degrees per 1,000 feet. So when you get up to about 40,000 feet, you're looking at a negative 50, 60 degrees up there. Can you think of how cold that would be?
Wow. And a lot of people, there's some documented cases that people leave a warm country like Colombia or even Cuba. And there's a story of a stowaway from Cuba who in 1969, I believe, he got into an Iberia jet, a DC-8, assigned the flight 904 between Havana and Madrid. He was a teenager and left in a t-shirt because it's like very warm out there.
Yeah.
But he had no idea it was going to be like minus 61 degrees Fahrenheit up there.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's an interesting topic. The survival people that has survived that has been interesting to me. Now I've got some stats for you if you got it real quick. From 1947 to 2015, there's been 113 attempts on 101 flights. Now, 113 attempts, then a lot of those people stowed away in what they consider the landing gear doors and landing gear access areas. Well, out of those, of course, you got a very few survival rate. I think there's like an 86, 88% rate that you're not going to survive something like that, even at lower altitude flights. And one of the incidents I remember, and I think it was there was actually a video that came across the internet on it. They were stowed up in the landing gear wheels, kind of like on a 7.5 or 7.6. And when the doors came out, they dropped and fell to their death in the ground.
Well, actually, there's one case is documented. It was, I believe, in Australia, a young 14-year-old who was a little ambitious. He wanted to travel the world, and he got into the wheel wells of a DC-8 at Japan Airlines. And what happened is that I don't remember exactly when the landing gear was being retracted. Another door opened, and he fell out of there 200 feet to his death, and that was captured on film by an amateur photographer who just happened to be there photographing that airline, not knowing that he took a picture that was going to be living in the memories of people for years and years.
Actually, I remember that particular incident. And again, some more statistics for you. Most of them were all male under 30. In fact, and out of that statistics I gave you, the 113 out of 101 are all male under 30. Since 2015, there's been 19. Now, on the flights of the 113, there were 86 deaths, 76% fatality rate. Then again, those further 19, they don't have a whole lot of statistics on that, but there have been some survivors. But it's very interesting.
So I made a video on the wheel well stowaways that I'm going to have to scrap right now, because I was convinced back in the day when I was making the video that there's no way you can survive that, because you're exposed to hypothermia, hypoxia, yes, conditions that are like beyond bearable. And can you just imagine all those pipes and all those electrical wires that the wheel well contains when the wheels are closing in?
Mm-hmm.
You can get squished to death in there.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of room, and if you're in the wrong spot, you're exactly it. You're going to get squished to death.
And if you fall unconscious, you know, through hypothermia and all that, if you make it, when the plane's going to be coming in for landing and the landing gear is retracted, you could easily fall out of there and never know you fell out of there because you're unconscious, and you can't be holding on to something consciously. So chances of death are like really, really high. You know,
well, that reminds me of something. Have you ever seen a lizard freeze in a tree when it gets really cold?
No.
Well, when I'm in Florida a lot, because I have a place in the Florida Keys, when I'm in Florida, we have iguanas, which are invasive species. And it gets cold on a rare occasion, but it does get cold in the winter times. And this past winter, we got down in the low 50s. And for down there, that is cold. Of course, everybody up north was really, really cold. And the iguanas that are in the trees, they will unanimate. And they will fall out of the tree, and they will just lay there like they're lifeless until it warms up. And then all of a sudden, they're just like they're alive again, and nothing ever happened. Wow. So what I believe, some of these survivors have made that. I think it has slowed their mechanicals of their body down so much that they were able to get through that somehow. So the asphyxiation didn't happen and didn't kill them because of the cold temperatures. And then also the blood and stuff also slowed down from the heart pumping and everything as well. So it's a very interesting thing. So that just kind of reminds me of that story about the lizards in the trees down there.
Wow. Captain Cartwright, I believe this is all the time we have for this time around, but you know what? I know that I like the show very much, and I get the feeling that you share the same thoughts I do.
Yes, I do.
And something tells me we're going to be back for more of this. And folks, if you have any suggestions, you can always leave your comments. We always read after the show. You can leave your comments, suggestions. If you want us to talk about certain topics, please feel free to do so. We will be coming back sometime. You know, we are pilots on the fly after all. So, you know, you never know when we're going to be back. So, Haas, you're going to be flying out pretty soon this week?
Yeah, I'll be flying, doing an East Coast, what we call the East Coast shuttle, or the West Coast shuttle. I'll be flying from the East Coast to the West Coast, and then doing a shuttle out on the West Coast for a little while.
Wish I could be there watching all this live in that jump seat. So, Captain, stand by because we're going to be going off air. We're going to be having our usual meet and greet with the producer and the techie. And for the traditional selfie picture, thank you very much, Esther, for tuning in. Thank you for your great comment. Thank you to everybody for tuning in. And we hope to see you here next week. In the meantime, keep watching the Ask Pilot Bobs and my daily blogs. And make sure you give us some nice comments and give us likes and what have you. Your closing comments, dear co-host.
Well, this was a great show, and I'm definitely hope that we can do a lot more of them and expand on the topics and even the knowledge that we've been helped spreading out for everybody else. I love talking aviation, and I love talking to aviation enthusiasts like you, so I'm all in.
All right, guys. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. We'll be seeing you soon. Ciao.
Bye.